So for our learning outcomes for this unit, I think there are 5 things that I'd like you to know by the end. The first is that I hope that you're able to describe and explain some portions of the Federal Clean Air Act. Specifically, I want you to be able to explain the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. That's an acronym, NAAQS, or NAAQS, National Ambient Air Quality Standards. We will talk about attainment and non-attainment of those air quality standards and what that means. We'll talk about state implementation plans. We will also talk about the mobile sources of emissions and how the CAFE, Corporate Automobile Fuel Efficiency Standards, are set. A big issue in the Clean Air Act are how we regulate cross-boundary pollutants. Those are pollutants that cross state boundaries, such as they might be created through the emissions of coal-fired power plants in the Midwest, and that then blows to the northeast and creates acid rain problems here in the Adirondacks. So we'll talk about the system that regulates those cross-state air pollutions. We'll also talk about new sources of emissions. These are industrial sites that are newly constructed, and they have to meet a higher level of standard than sites that have already been in operation. And then we will talk about acid rain and the cap and trade program that regulates acid rain. I want you to be able to describe some of the factors that contribute to the complexities of regulating and mitigating air quality, such as those cross-boundary factors or differences in the health impacts to different social groups. Young children, the elderly, women of childbearing age all have different health considerations than the average healthy adult. And so the question arises when we create policies with health-based standards about whose health we are most concerned about and where do we set the standard in order to protect people's health. We also need to be able to think about evolving technologies and how we implement ever-changing technology into our environmental policies and what that might do to the economy and the ability of older industrial sites to continue to operate. I want you to be able to describe several different policy instruments that are commonly used in environmental policy and explain their strengths and weaknesses. These are things like bans, performance standards, technology standards, economic policies, and health-based standards. Those are 5 specific types of policies or policy instruments that we will talk about. Some we've already talked about. We have examples of bans already, because we've talked about the prohibition on take in the Endangered Species Act. That's a ban on take. But we'll talk about what that ban means or what a ban means in the context of air quality as well. And lastly, I want you to be able to elaborate on the importance of a few main concepts and their relevance to clean air. And those concepts that we're going to focus on are the public trust doctrine. We've already talked about that. We will talk about the principle of cooperative federalism, and we'll also introduce a new concept called competitive federalism. We'll talk about the difference between cooperative and competitive federalism. We'll talk about end-of-pipe controls, and we'll also talk about command and control governance.